Every now and then in discourse about speedrunning, I hear the idea thrown around about retiring from speedrunning or being close to the end of your speedrun career, and it's really got me thinking about my speedrun career and where I'm at with the hobby. As of January 16th of this year, my speedrun.com account will be 6 years old, which was basically the starting point for when I was really officially submitting speedruns. That's crazy to me, so I was thinking that we could walk down memory lane to commemorate the occasion, and maybe get some more ideas about what it really means to be a speedrunner. To start this conversation about what it really means to be a speedrunner, let's talk about where I started. I don't think it really makes sense to say somebody's speedrunning career comes to an end in the same way. I don't really know that there's a black and white line on where a speedrunning career starts. When I first started speedrunning, before I was really submitting to leaderboards or going to events or anything, I was playing Mario Bros. Well, I was phoning a friend and we were seeing who could beat the game faster. We didn't really know what speedrunning was at the time. We were just playing a game that we had beaten multiple times and trying to get faster and better at it as we went. And I think this eventually became a speedrunning hobby for me. But at the time, I wasn't, saying, oh, I'm speedrunning. I was just playing this game. And I think in that way that naturally a lot of people who speedrun now do it because they played a game they liked over and over and wanted to get better at it. I don't think there's really a way you can ever be done speedrunning, because you'll always find a game you go back to and play it again, and that'll be a speedrun whether you know it or not, I guess. But anyways, like I said earlier, around early 2019, I found speedrun.com and made myself an account and started submitting games. And you might be thinking, oh, well, you just said you were playing Mario Bros., which is like one of the most popular speedrun games, so surely that's what you submitted first, right? No, that honor would go to ToeJam and Earl on the Sega Genesis. And while I might have been running a meme category at the time, it is what got me started. The day that I created my speedrun.com account, I would submit my first run of ToeJam and Earl's Hot Tub category. This run wasn't amazing and my layout was horrible, but it's my first run and I gotta respect that. A few days later, I would get my first podium placement on a leaderboard with my co-op run of the Hot Tub category. Me and Jake Kett, who's the second player in this run, had previously bonded over our love for the ToeJam and Earl series, and saw an underdeveloped leaderboard where we knew we could beat the time, so we wanted to set a run together. While he's gone on to continue an awesome ToeJam and Earl collection, I don't think he's really done that much with speedrunning, but I certainly continued to go from there. But while speedrunning ToeJam and Earl was fun, I don't think I actually really got into the hobby until my next major game I started speedrunning, Sonic Drift. I don't think it's any secret that I'm a big Sonic fan, but another thing that was really great about Drift for me was it was a game that I grew up with through the Sonic Mega Collection Plus on PS2. So I had a lot of experience at the game, and I wasn't actually trash at it like I was at ToeJam and Earl. While my times in ToeJam and Earl really rode off of the fact that not many other people were playing, there were actually active players at the time in Sonic Drift. This not only gave me a good sense of accomplishment, as well as a sense of progression as my times got lower, but it also gave me a good competition to fight against. This is a point that I'm going to be touching on a lot more later, but for now let's just talk about who is, in my opinion, the greatest to ever do it, a man named Dweather. You see, in my early days of running Drift, my times actually were pretty decent. Out of the game's 3 categories at the time, I had really resonated with Red GP, and I got my first record in that. This would go on to be the category's shortest standing record, only lasting 4 days, because after my first record, Dweather would also pin his first record down in the same exact category. This wouldn't be the only time Dweather would perform this feat. He's done it to me a couple times, actually. You see, Dweather is a guy who's probably as passionate as I am, if not more, about Sonic Drift.
Confirmed for sure. Best racing game of all time, and if you disagree with that, I'll give you that one, but it's at least the best Sonic racing game of all time. Confirmed.
For sure, without a doubt.
That's not up for debate.
Playing against Dweather really helped keep me active and dedicated to Sonic Drift, and because of this, I saw my times lower a substantial amount. I would go on to continuously lower my time, as well as Dweather did, and to this day he actually holds a full sweep of the game. But there were also points in the history where I held a lot of the records and was one of the most active players, and because of that, Sonic Drift really became a passion project of mine. But of course, if we're going to be talking about passion projects, I've got to dive into some of the other games that I play. My hype for Sonic Drift would eventually wear off, and I'd want to find other Sonic games to run. I ended up settling on Sega Sonic the Hedgehog as I was getting really into emulation and trying the game for the first time, and there weren't really any speedruns of it at the time. For the first couple of months, I was the only runner, but soon I'd be approached by an individual who would greatly change the trajectory of my speedrunning career. This person, of course, is Hypnotix, a guy who you will see reappear a lot throughout this story. Hypnotix saw the potential that Sega Sonic had as a speed game, and in a very primitive era of running the game, he managed to catch up and start putting down very formidable times. After just 3 months of running, he would even claim the record as his own, and thus would begin our long-running speedrunning rivalry. Earlier I said I was going to dive more into the effect of competition on speedrunning, and I think right now is the most appropriate time to address that. In my opinion, speedrunning is a primarily community-based hobby. In the same way that athletes are encouraged by their coaches as well as their rivals, I think speedrunners are encouraged both by their friends who teach them the games they play as well as their rivals who give them a run for their money. At this point I had my speedrunning rival, and Sega Sonic became a huge mainstay for me. I like Sega Sonic as a game, but what I think was most exciting to me was racing against Hib to see who could get a run with better execution in it, or who could implement new strategies first in a good run. Me and Hib would set up many impromptu live races where we would run against each other in real time to see who could complete the game fastest. This was a really good way of practice for me because I have a bad habit of resetting frequently, and this would force me to complete runs even if they weren't necessarily on pace, and most of my records to this point have actually come from these live races. Hib would also encourage me to submit my runs to marathons, and in May of 2020 I would perform my first marathon run, of course being a run of Sega Sonic the Hedgehog. Whilst Hib joined the Sega Sonic community in 2020, a year later in 2021, we would get another very notable runner, Spectral Platypus. Spectral Platypus was an absolute unit running this game because of the way that he streamlined his practice. He would very quickly rise to be in contention for the record, and he would participate frequently in the live races as well. This competition between the three of us would stay blazing throughout the years, and we would go back and forth trading times, but another thing that all of us did was campaign very hard to get new runners to run the game. If you had talked to any of us three at any point where we were actively running the game, we probably tried to get you to run it too. As a result of this, Sega Sonic is a very active speedrunning game, and it's also quite an easy one, so if you'd like to pick it up, you might want to check out the speedrun guide that I also have on my YouTube channel. But anyways, enough shilling. Let's jump back to when I first started speedrunning this game in 2019. One final important event for me in the 2019 year for speedrunning was my participation in a Mario Kart 64 speedrunning tournament. While I did absolutely terrible and didn't really speedrun Mario Kart 64 before or after this much, I really enjoyed it, and it was my first speedrunning event. As I mentioned in the Sega Sonic portion of this video, I went on to submit to the ESA Marathon and a bunch of other marathons after that too. My marathon appearances were mostly running Sega Sonic and Sonic Drift, but both of these games are pretty short, under 15 minutes, so they weren't really good contenders for marathons. Because of that, I decided that I should learn a new game that's a little bit longer and more suited for marathon running, since I found it was something I really enjoyed. Towards the end of October of 2020, I would finish my first run of Knuckles Chaotix, a game that I had eyed up many times before, but previously not felt confident in my ability to finish a run of due to its difficult movement. This would become one of, if not my favorite speed game, and it would go on to become the game that I've done most speedrunning of. I wish I had more to say about Chaotix, but it's just really a great movement game. I just really love playing it, and the meta seems to change pretty frequently, so there's always something new for me to learn, which I really like. It has a really high skill ceiling, so I never really feel like I'm done with the game, and that's probably what's kept me coming back to it so much. But anyways, this also is a great one for marathons, and I really enjoy it. Doing these speedrun marathons was great because it kind of gave me something that I could show to people who weren't super familiar with speedruns as to what it was that I was up to. A lot of these marathons that I was part of were spectated by some of my family members or other friends who just weren't really indoctrinated with speedrunning, and I just think that was really cool. But the holy grail of marathons, if you will, the one that has the most reach to people outside of speedrunning circles, is Games Done Quick. Up to this point, I had not yet been part of a Games Done Quick event, but that was about to change. Around the beginning of 2021, I had a feature on my Twitch channel that would allow users to use their channel points to request that I speedrun a game of their choosing. Hypnotics, who's just as much of an obscure Sonic game runner as I was, requested that I play Sonic Blast, a game that he had recently picked up. This became a regular game for us to run on marathons and just in our free time, and if we weren't rivals at this point, we were in a full-blown war now. Sonic Blast is actually one of my most presented marathon games, and most of the times that I did it, I was racing with Hibby as well. Me and Hibberoni's first Sonic Blast race happened on the Sonic and the Side Quest GDQ Hotfix, which for those who don't know, hotfixes are basically smaller shows that GDQ runs throughout the year between their main events that usually have some sort of fun spin on them. 2 years and many marathons later, we would finally be accepted onto the main show, Awesome Games Done Quick 2023. The tension going into this event was really high, but I knew either way I was going to have a really good time. This run was at an ungodly hour in the morning for me, but even so, I still had such a good time doing this run with Mr. Nautix. For any speedrunner, running on a marathon of this size is pretty high stakes because it's a lot of people's first impression of you. If you have a big personality with streaming or with video uploads, a lot of times this sort of thing can be really good publicity to bring people to your channel. I like to consider myself an avid Twitch streamer, so I was definitely a little bit nervous about this and really hoping to win. We ended up keeping a really close race, but in the end, H-Dog came out on top. Even if I didn't win the race, I was a winner getting to participate in this event with my good friend Hibby Dibby and getting to play Sonic Blast for such a big audience. After GDQ, I definitely slowed down a little bit with this game though. At this point, I had been running majorly Sonic games for a couple of years, and just between burnout and a couple of other reasons, I decided that I wanted to branch out from the Sonic series. So that's exactly what I did. For a little while, I just jumped around randomly playing whatever game caught my eye. But eventually I would find a category that I felt really fit my interests, and that would be racing games. Those who know me in real life know that I'm a mechanic, and so naturally my interest in cars would translate into interesting games about cars. Honestly, in my opinion, racing games are some of the most slept on speedruns because the games are literally about trying to go faster. There are some racing games that I run that I didn't quite click with, but I really enjoyed, like the Outrun series, but then there are games like Racing Lagoon or Cat's Run. Let's start with the latter. Cat's Run is really not that much to write home about being on the Super Famicom. It's basically just a kart racer similar to Mario Kart, but it uses K-cars. There actually wasn't a leaderboard for this at all, so me and Spectral Platypus went about our way setting up one. The game's pretty neat, but it's definitely no Racing Lagoon. Racing Lagoon is an awesome Squaresoft RPG, but instead of turn-based battles, you race. I just love the concept for this, and the game has so much style, it's just such a cool game. This is my longest speedrun to date, clocking in at over 7 hours. But man, I'm so proud of it, even if it's a bad run. But I would also find another great interest in running co-op games. Not only would I return to some old games like Knuckles Chaotix or Sega Sonic to do co-op runs in those, but I also would find some new games. For whatever reason, I seem to gravitate towards arcade games for these co-op runs, so I've done some things like Gal's Panic and Puzzle Poco. During this period of revisitation for me, I also went back to my roots and played a little bit more Sonic Drift. After this last hurrah in Sonic Drift, I would kind of simmer off for a little while, focusing on work and other things in my personal life. Though I would still speedrun from time to time, it wasn't nearly as much as before. I did, however, recently start running Resident Evil, a game which I made myself a comprehensive guide for, and I'm really enjoying it. I'll probably be running this one a lot more in the future. I've also continued with some old haunts, such as continuing to run Puzzle Poco for the arcade or doing attempts in Sega Sonic, so everything's still on the table. So yeah, that brings us up to speed and to the current day, and what do I think? Well, I don't know that I went into this project expecting to have any takeaways. I really just wanted to celebrate some of the things that I've done over my speedrunning career so far. But the one theme that I really noticed throughout making this video is that, for me anyways, speedrunning is completely about community. I mean, hell, this is supposed to be a video where I celebrate myself, and I spent like half of it talking about other people. I think for me anyway, it's not even about the records or setting a good time, it's just about playing a game with other people, and that can be something that's easy to lose sight of in this day and age, especially with how dramatized speedrunning can be. A lot of people get really wrapped up in world record culture, and while it's good to have goals, I've seen a lot of people turn away from the hobby because they don't feel like they can get the world record. And so to those people I say just give it a try, and even if you're not the best, you're still better than most. Even if you're at the very bottom of the leaderboard, you're still within the top however many people in the world of completing the game, and that's cool in itself. But yeah, I don't really want to get too high up on a soapbox here. This wasn't really supposed to be any sort of discussion or thought-provoking video. I just really wanted to celebrate some of my accomplishments. Thanks again to everybody who watched this, everybody who I mentioned in this video as a runner or somebody that has influenced my speedrunning career, and thank you to anybody who's out there speedrunning and building a good speedrunning community for your game. So with that, here's to another good year in speedrunning.